Hi everyone. Today I'll be discussing about design database security and audit schemes. First, we have to understand the basis of security and audit schemes. It may actually come about from customer and system requirements such as confidentiality, access control, among others, statutory and regulatory requirements like the Data Privacy Act, E-commerce law, Cybercrime Prevention Act, and others, and standards adopted by the organization like ISO 27001 or ISMS or Information Security Management System and ISO 20000, among others. For this discussion, we will make use of what the module discussed with regards to the two major categories of data access controls. First are discretionary access controls, and second would be mandatory access controls. When we talk about discretionary access controls, it talks about regulating all user accesses to the data that is stored in the database. And there are five security features discussed in our module: privileges, roles, views, stored procedures, and triggers. Privileges are permissions to perform a particular database operation, such as querying, updating, deleting, or inserting data. And basically, they are controlled with grant statements. So the basic rule of thumb is that grant the users only the strict minimum set of privileges required to accomplish normal day-to-day business tasks. This also ensures that the selected relational database can implement this only on a need-to-know basis security policy by default. And what's the caveat because of that? Nobody can have database access privileges unless he or she is specifically granted permission to use database privileges. Why is this important? Basically, it is to ensure that the database system retains full control over who accesses the data stored in the database. Now, it's also important to take note that the database administrator should review the security requirements that were defined during the analysis phase, including changes that have occurred since then. And this includes database object access rules on select, insert, update, delete, execute, index, reference, alter, grant, and of course, all. So please also take note that typically the users are allowed only select, insert, update, and delete accesses to a database object so as to avoid having complications with the security features. When we talk about roles, it focuses on the collection of predefined privileges that can be granted either to users or to other roles. So the idea there is that privileges can be given to a group of users for which common functions is granted through the command role. So for instance, in this example that is discussed, we actually create the role of the human resource and we grant that human resource select, update, insert, and delete roles. So, or privileges. Basically, then we can assign this role to a certain eng department or engineering department, say for instance. Likewise, roles are used to define the single role that can be granted to several users. Like for example, as we have already created the role of human resource.rep, then we can grant this role to Paul and Mary alike. Likewise, a role may be assigned a password for additional layer of security. So for instance, in this example, we can say that the role human resource.rep is given the password XYZ. So please also take note that rules can be activated within an application to constrain users to exercising their privileges only within the boundaries of that application. As soon as the users quit the application, the privileges are revoked immediately. And this basically prevents potentially hazardous situation where users can execute destructive SQL statements against database tables. So another thing to consider are real life situations that frequently occur in the workplace. So for instance, we have given a certain supervisor the role to a database, but we can actually take note that that person may be, out for a certain period in that organization. So how do we now actually temporarily replace the supervisor for that short period of time? For views, this talks about how we can utilize advantageously to exert more control on the user's ability to access information stored in database. So for instance, we can see here that we actually create a view in terms of the emp underscore sub v, and we select the certain fields like emp name, emp ID, and emp sub v. And basically, it comes from emp table. For stored procedures, can be created to perform a function with all necessary database access privileges. So the permission to execute the stored procedure is then granted to certain users. This authorization is done without granting the users any direct access rights to the tables and SQL operations that are used by the stored procedure. Also, users are granted execute privileges on the stored procedure itself, and the only possible way for them to access the data in the database is through the stored procedure. For application level security, we have to take note that alternate method to limit access may actually include the rule accesses or access rules within the application code itself. And the application itself controls the data access. So please do take note that this might present serious shortcomings when the users attempt to bypass the application and access the data directly via an ad hoc query tool, for instance. The second type or major category of data access control would be the mandatory access controls. And basically, from the term itself, only the security administrator can manage and administer the data accesses in the database. Likewise, there's the principle of database encryption. So please do take note that encryption is a special technique that is used to convert readable data into an unreadable data. So it's like a lock and key mechanism, primarily used to scramble information used in digital transmission, but can be also used to secure the information contained in a database or other types of data storage facilities. Another consideration we have to take note are database audit requirements. So in terms of the ones discussed in our module, database audit facilities may include that of the reporting facility, where some general database reporting facilities are provided to produce various database audit reports and also to support ad hoc queries against the audit information that is centrally stored in a database system. For the data manipulation language or data definition language auditing, basically it focuses on standard auditing facilities that are provided to allow the automatic auditing of various data manipulation language and data definition language statements for all types of database objects and structures. For the database user connections auditing, standard auditing facilities are provided to allow the auditing of all the attempts that are made to connect with or disconnect from the database. In terms of user activity auditing, it is a standard auditing facility that is provided to allow the auditing of all database activity by operation by utilizing of database system privileges by objects or by the user. So basically, what goes about is that, as mentioned earlier, we have various requirements in an organization, and the granularity and scope of the database audit functions can be as generic as auditing all database accesses that are made by the users across the enterprise, or as confined as auditing the database activities of a particular individual. So what's more important is, of course, for us to define what our requirements are. In the next presentation, I'll be presenting the bonus perspectives of ISO 27001-2013 Annex for you to get a better picture of other perspectives, specifically on the ISO standard. So see you on the next presentation.